The greatest part about the Choptank is that it changes every couple miles. You're down in Tillman Island and off the mouth of Harris Creek and Broad Creek. You're in this really vast, wide open area. And then the further you start coming upriver, once you go under the bridge coming into Cambridge, things start to narrow down a little bit, and then you start to see some more of the natural features. The salt marshes really start to kick in. The shorelines become a little less developed. You really start to get a sense of what this was like hundreds of years ago. The Choptank in and of itself has about 1,000 square miles of its watershed that drains into the river. And of those 1,000 square miles, the dominant land use there is agriculture. But then the water itself is used by many different folks. We've got commercial crab fishing. The white perch and the rockfish spawning in the Choptank River is unlike no other river.
Look at that!
And then from the recreational side, you've got a lot of people that love to get into the small creeks and do fishing via kayaks or on the shoreline.
Virtually nobody has seen or got any idea that this is the way the river is up here. This is what the land used to look like before the Europeans got here. Deep, thick topsoil, very spongy, absorbed all the precipitation. Only about 10 or 15% of it would have run off as surface runoff. We've changed all that. It was thought among the people that came here with the wherewithal to alter the land that if you left your land forested, you're ne'er-do-well. Civilizing it, controlling it, making it produce crops, making it produce income. This was considered the ideal. With this one loss of forest, we've changed the entire hydrological regime of all of our rivers. And that's at least a fourth and maybe more of the problems of Chesapeake Bay. It's only 26% forested. If this were all still forested, you wouldn't see this mud. You wouldn't get the discharge of phosphorus. You wouldn't get the discharge of nitrogen. Water flows downhill in response to gravity. The forest controls that flow.
One of my favorite moments is getting out, right before sunrise and diving in the water and swimming a mile or two. We fight every day to make sure that our rivers are swimmable all the time, which unfortunately they aren't. I organized a swim across the Choptank River to support clean water. And this swim was scheduled for May in 2018. And I'll say it was the first time the river turned around and kicked me in the butt and gave me a reality shock of what we're really working with. The swim got canceled because the water quality was so polluted. We had 10 inches of rain fall the week leading up to the swim, and our bacteria readings were sky high, out of the roof. And so we could not put swimmers in the water that day, and that crushed me. Our water isn't blue, and that's just a matter of the fact. We have brown water, and that messes with a lot of things, namely the clarity, allowing sun to penetrate through the water column and help to grow our underwater grasses and all those great things. We're a science-based organization, and we pride ourselves in using science to figure out our approach to how we're going to restore our waterways. So we measure water clarity every time we're out on the water because it's really important to have an understanding of what those conditions are. Up on the upper part of the Choptank, it's unfortunate, but I'd say the average depth of clarity is less than 2 feet. So let's dive into everyone's favorite river, the Choptank. How many of you are on the Choptank River here tonight? All right, that's great. We take all the water quality data that we collect throughout the season and we develop a report card. You've got so much land up in this. It grades the rivers and it allows us to show that in a way that's understandable by the community. The upper Choptank River, nitrogen and phosphorus were the culprits there, and it brought it down from a C+ to a C. The Choptank River is the epicenter of not only oyster harvesting, but also oyster restoration.
I run the largest oyster hatchery on the east coast of Maryland. We primarily produce larvae for restoration, but we're also producing larvae, spat, and seed for use in aquaculture and the wild fishery. We are really conveniently located on the Choptank River.
Yeah.
Our setting pier is right here, so when we are doing our large-scale spout and shell restoration efforts, we can physically move them from this tank and right onto our landing vessel. We're very close to being finished with the little Choptank restoration.
I know, there's just a few acres left.
Yep.
We've got 3 of the 5 large-scale oyster restoration sanctuaries on the Choptank River, namely Harris Creek, the Trudavin River, and the Little Choptank. Harris Creek is notably the largest oyster restoration project in the world, and recent studies have shown that all the oysters in Harris Creek can filter all the water in the creek in about 10 days, which is really impressive. They also accumulate nitrogen. They pull nitrogen out of the system and they release it as nitrogen gas. And the estimates currently are that all the oysters in Harris Creek will be able to remove 1 million pounds of nitrogen in just 1 decade.
I see what our rivers look like, but I also see that we have a lot of opportunity to improve and clean up our waterways. And one of those ways is working directly with the agricultural community. This farm behind me is managed by the Hutchisons. They work throughout Caroline and Talbot counties. They're one of the most forward-thinking farmers around this region.
We try to be environmentally responsible, and I think most farmers are. It doesn't make us unique, but we try some new things, different things such as the nitrogen bioreactors to remove nitrate in the surface water runoff that we have. We have 3 of those. We also manage nitrogen as closely as we can. This cornfield behind me had 4 different applications during the year.
After I got out of grad school, lived in Annapolis for about a year, knew I wanted to get out of the city. Found this little place up here, about 30 acres, and half of it, about 15 acres, is in corn tillage. Very poor, acidic soil. Corn never got over about that high. So as soon as we took it over, we terminated the tillage agreement and immediately began to let it grow up. In 3 or 4 years, the little pine trees started to show up. Then the little hardwood started to come up in there. And that's been 53 years ago. This is what we wanted. We wanted to see it renew itself and heal itself. And it didn't cost anything.
It's all about a balance, and I strongly believe that humans and nature can interact in a balanced way. My vision for a healthy river is one where our natural resources are blossoming like you wouldn't believe, but then also one where our communities are engaged in the river, but not only that, they prioritize water quality. And that's from the local government right down to your homeowner. I would love for my son to have greater recreational and natural resource opportunities on the Choptank River than what we have today.
Oh, he's standing. Woo! Is that your knee?